Maureen is with us in New York City to start off this hour. Hey, Maureen, how are you?
Better than I deserve. How are you?
Just the same. How can I help?
I'm 22 years old. As you said, I'm living in New York City with a full-time job. I've never had a credit card, and I don't want one. It doesn't sit well with me. But lately, a lot of my coworkers and friends are telling me that I, quote, have to get one to build credit. I've only had one $1,500 student loan that I paid off within 6 months of graduating. I have a month-to-month living situation, so I'm not under a lease, and I've never had one, but I'm looking into moving into an apartment next year where I'd be signing my first lease. So I'm afraid that I'll get denied an apartment because of my lack of credit, but I want to know, is no credit significantly worse than average credit? And if so, is there a way for me to build credit otherwise?
Okay. Well, the only way to build your credit score or to build credit is to borrow money. Why? So that you can pay it back. Why? So that you have the opportunity to borrow more money and raise your score. Why? So that you can borrow more money. Why? So that you can have the opportunity to raise your score and borrow more money. This is a dog chasing its tail that keeps bankers rich. The only reason you build credit is why? So you can build credit. Why? So you can build credit. Why? So you can build credit. It's all about going into debt. The whole thing is.
Right.
And staying in debt, which you have just said that your broke friends don't think is a good idea. Well, if broke people are making fun of your financial plan, that's generally a good thing. So now the reality is that the downside of living with a high credit score, if you have an 800 credit score, it basically means you've paid roughly $100,000 in interest over the last few years. So because it's an I love debt score. It's the only way to build a credit score is to go into debt. It's the only possible way. There's not another way to do it. And so worshiping at the altar of the great FICO as your provider in life is a really bad altar to worship at. It'll keep you in debt the rest of your life. So if you want to play that side of it, you can play that side of it. There's not a really good middle ground is the problem. You've either got to sell out. You either got to sell out to FICO, or you got to sell out to I'm going to avoid FICO, because the middle ground means you have a low credit score, which means you paid a bunch of interest and still didn't get the benefits of having a FICO score. So now, what does that mean in reality? I do not have a FICO score. Okay, I'm a multimillionaire. So what that means is I can go down to the local apartment complex that requires a FICO score to rent an apartment, if that one does. Not all of them do. And I walk in, and a 26-year-old property manager says, no, Mr. Multimillionaire, we cannot rent you an apartment. Now, I can write a check and buy the complex, but I can't rent an apartment there. That's how dumb asinine this whole idea is. And so what it amounts to is this. Can you find an apartment in New York City that does not require a FICO score? Yes. Will you get turned down for some that require a FICO score? Yes. And I would face exactly the same obstacles that you are facing. So you're either going to have to find people who will work with you and do business with you without a FICO score over the scope of your life, or you need to go worship at the altar of the great FICO. There's not a good middle ground. And so you're going to have the challenge of being in debt the rest of your life, or you're going to have the challenge of occasionally someone, because you don't have a FICO score, will not let you do something. And believe me, I personally have experienced that type of FICO score-ism. It's a type of, it's an ism. It's like sexism and racism, and, it's prejudice is what it is. And so I've been turned down for things. My auto insurance is higher because I don't have a FICO score. It's just illegal, but they just do it. I mean, it's just wrong. But they just do it. And so, you're going to run into stuff like that, and you just have to decide which game I'm going to play overall, because there's not a really good middle ground. You see what I'm saying? I mean, if you sort of build your credit, and I'm sort of in debt, you sort of have a FICO score, and your FICO score will suck. And then that's worse. That's worse than not having one. I think you could go into an apartment manager who has a brain, not all of them do, and say, look, hey, I'm 22. I don't have any debt. You know what that means? I got a lot of money. I can pay the rent. That's what it means. If somebody comes to me, I own a bunch of rental property. If somebody comes to us and says, I have no FICO score, that means you have no debt. That means you have the money to pay the rent. I like you as a tenant, but I have a brain. And not everyone has a brain that rents apartments. And so you're going to run into people that aren't allowed to or choose not to think in our culture because the FICO score has become so ubiquitous. And it's out of control. So that's what your thing is. And, you have to get a credit card? No, that's just people trying to justify their stupidity. You don't have to. But you can make a choice to. You can decide to go that way and go into debt so that you can go into debt so that you can go into debt so that you can go into debt and be a dog chasing its tail for the rest of your life.